This is the brand new Shoei Hornet ADV-06. And if you're thinking, that looks exactly like the old one, you're not wrong. But here's the thing, it's taken Shoei nearly 5 years to bring this out. And in that time, the adventure helmet market has moved on massively. New standards, new competitors, everything has stepped up. So the big question is, what have Shoei actually changed? And more importantly, is it worth it? Because on paper, this isn't a complete redesign. But sometimes the small changes are the ones that actually matter. I'm Jamie from Moto Central, and today we're going to break this down properly. No marketing spin, just what the helmet actually is, and whether it deserves a place in 2026. Now, before we get into what has changed, let's talk about what this helmet actually is, because that matters more than anything else. The Hornet ADV-06 is a proper adventure helmet, not just a road helmet with a peak stuck on the front, and not a full-face off-road lid either. It sits right in the middle. So if you're doing a mix of road riding, touring, maybe a bit of green laning, this is exactly the kind of helmet that is aimed at you. You've got the comfort and practicality of a full-face road helmet, proper visor, good visibility, everyday usability, but then you've also got the off-road side of it, the peak, the airflow, and the more upright riding position it's designed for. And that's why helmets like this have become so popular, because most riders aren't doing one or the other anymore, they're doing a bit of everything. Now, in terms of where this sits in the market, it's right up there with helmets like the Arai Tourcross 5. So we're talking proper premium adventure helmets here. Not budget, not entry level, this is right at the top end. And that's important, because when you're paying this kind of money, you expect it to do everything well, not just look the part. Actually perform on the road and off it. So let's get into what's actually changed with the Hornet ADV-06, because on the surface, it does look very, very similar to the previous version. And to be honest, that's because it mostly is. This isn't a complete redesign, it's more of a refinement. But there are a few key updates that actually matter. The first one, and the most obvious one, is that it's now ECE 2206 certified. So it's been tested to a higher standard. More impact points, more realistic testing. And from a safety point of view, that's exactly where you'd expect a modern Shoei helmet to be. But realistically, that's something it had to have. That's not the reason you'd upgrade. The more interesting change is the ventilation. Shoei have tweaked the layout slightly and focused more on how the air actually moves through the helmet. So rather than just adding more vents, the idea here is better airflow across your head while you're riding. There's also a ventilated center pad now, which is designed to help move the air through the helmet more effectively. And that's important because if you've used the previous Hornet, ventilation was one of the areas people weren't completely sold on. So this feels like Shoei have looked at that and gone, right, let's refine it. But aside from that, a lot of this helmet is what already worked. The same AIM Plus shell construction, same overall shape, same core design. And that's where it gets a bit interesting, because if you put this next to the previous Hornet, most people wouldn't spot the difference straight away. It still looks like a Hornet, which for some people is exactly what they want. But if you're expecting something completely new, this probably isn't it. Now, one of the biggest talking points with this helmet is actually something it doesn't have. There's no internal sun visor. And to be honest, that might come as a bit of a surprise. Because if you look at something like the Shoei GTR 3 or the Shoei Neotech 3, that's become a pretty standard feature for Shoei now. So you probably would expect to see it here as well. And to be fair, it's something we expected as well. But Shoei have deliberately left it out. And the thinking behind that is that this is still designed as more of an off-road focused adventure helmet, where you're relying more on the peak, or potentially using different setups like goggles. There was also concern that with off-road vibrations, it might cause a drop-down visor to act in a way that would not be good for anyone riding off-road. And to be fair, adding one into a helmet like this would mean compromises elsewhere: space, weight, shell design. So it's not as simple as just including it. Whether that's a good thing or not really just comes down to how you ride. So overall, this isn't Shoei trying to reinvent the Hornet, it's them taking something that already worked, updating it to modern standards, and refining the areas that needed improving. Right, let's take a proper look at it. Starting with the shell, you've got Shoei's AIM Plus construction, which is the multi-layer composite they use across their premium helmets. It's designed to give you that balance of strength and flexibility, so you're getting proper protection without it feeling overly heavy or bulky. You've also got multiple shell sizes, which helps keep the overall size of the helmet as compact as possible depending on which size you're in. Now this is a medium, my usual size, and straight away it feels exactly like what you'd expect from Shoei. When you put it on, it's nice and snug, no pressure points, very typical Shoei fit. It feels very familiar. If you've worn a Hornet before, this is exactly what you'd expect. In terms of weight, it feels pretty typical for this kind of helmet. Not super lightweight, but not overly heavy either. Moving on to the visor. This is the CNS2 system. So you've got a nice wide field of view, and it comes with a pin lock in the box as standard. It's also toolless to swap over, which is one of those small things that makes a big difference if you're actually using it day to day. Like we mentioned earlier, there's no internal sun visor on this, so you're relying on the peak, or swapping visors depending on how you ride. Now speaking of the peak, this is a big part of any adventure helmet, and what you really want here is stability, because there's nothing worse than getting up to motorway speeds and having your head pulled around. Shoei have always been pretty solid in this area, and from what we've seen so far, this sticks to the same formula. And like any helmet with a peak, you're going to get a bit more wind noise compared to a standard road helmet, especially at higher speeds. That's just a trade-off with this kind of design, especially if you're doing longer motorway runs or touring. That's something you'll definitely notice. Ventilation-wise, you've got intake vents across the chin, brow and top, and exhaust towards the rear. And like we said earlier, the focus here is more on how the air moves through the helmet, rather than just how much air goes in. Inside, everything's fully removable and washable. You've got different cheek pad sizes available, and it's all set up for intercom installation as well. You've also got everything you'd expect in the box. Pin lock, breath guard, chin curtain, all the usual Shoei extras. Safety-wise, double D-ring fastening, emergency quick release system, and of course, the ECE 2206 certification. So overall, exactly what you'd expect from a premium Shoei. Nothing flashy, nothing gimmicky, just a solid, well-built helmet. Now in terms of price, this sits exactly where you'd expect. $529.99 for plain colours and $649.99 for graphics like this one. They're available to order now on our website, and stock is due around June. And one thing worth mentioning with any Shoei is the personal fitting system. So for around £50, you can have this properly fitted to your head shape in store, which genuinely makes a big difference, especially if you're wearing it for longer rides. Now in terms of where this sits in the market, this is right up there with helmets like the Arai Tourcross 5. And we actually did a full video on the best adventure helmets you can buy right now. But this wasn't in it, purely because it wasn't out yet. But realistically, this would 100% be in that conversation. If you're doing a lot of serious off-road riding, this probably wouldn't be my first choice. So what is the verdict? This isn't a complete reinvention. If you're expecting something totally new, you might be a little underwhelmed. But that's not really where this helmet is trying to be. This is Shoei taking something that already worked and refining it to where it actually needed to be, bringing it up to modern standards, improving the areas that needed attention, and keeping everything people already liked about it. And if those ventilation changes deliver in the real world, this could quietly become one of the best adventure helmets out there. If you like the previous Hornet, this is an easy upgrade. And if you're looking for a premium adventure helmet in 2026, this is definitely one you should have on your shortlist. But for the right rider, it's going to make a lot of sense. And if you want to see how it compares to the rest of the market, check out our top 5 adventure helmets video next. I'll add that at the very end of the video. Thanks for watching, ride safe, and we'll see you in the next one.